Hello everyone, welcome to this session. I am Mr.P.Y.Kumbhar. Today we want to see national and cultural characteristics. The learning outcome of this topic is at the end of the session, student will be able to explain the concept of national and cultural characteristics. The content of these topics are introduction, age and gender, educational and employment, psychological factors, and we want to see some part of stages of cognitive moral development. Now, introduction. People from different cultural backgrounds likely to have different beliefs about right and wrong, different values, etc. And this will inevitably lead to variations in ethical decisions making across nations, religions, and cultures. Hofstede influential in sharpening our understanding of these differences, our mental programming as a collectivism, power distance, uncertainty avoidance, masculinity, and long term or we will call as a short term orientation. When you are talking of cultural and the characteristics of those cultures, you already understood like people from different culture think differently because of the emphasis of these different cultures. In understanding the facts as interpret what is a right and wrong and that leads to the variations. So according to the Hofstede, like the five major dimensions are like individualism and collectivism. What is the level of a power distance? Whether your preference for uncertainty, avoidance, tolerance, and masculinity, femininity, long term, and short term orientation. So these courses like helps in forming your opinion about what is a right and what is a wrong with respect to that particular culture and has definite role in sharpening your beliefs about it. So this is a what culture can contribute in asking or in developing your beliefs about right and wrong and does affect your decision making process. So what we find as the individual factors over here are the age and gender, national and cultural characteristics, education and employment, and also psychological factors like cognitive moral development locus of control, personal value, personal integrity, and moral imagination will start with the age and gender. Now we want to see age and gender. Again, age consists of results contradictory. However, experience may have the impact. In the gender, individual characteristics most often research results contradictory. Now, these categories too simplistic. What we understand, like with there are like research findings which are contradictory in nature with respect to how age helps in or like whether the differences in gender with respect to how it affects the decision making process for taking ethical decision making that process. Yes, we have like decided discussed earlier about the way of decision making and so the perspective like how women think and that because they think in terms of a relationship. So that is a perspective take like this is the decision making. These things like age and gender tells like the research to it is contradictory like we just cannot come to the conclusion. Like people who are elder in a nature, elder in terms of age and experience, they are better ethical decision makers as compared to the young people. Or maybe males are better decision makers than female or vice versa. Though, yes, when you are talking of a feelings, we are talking of a postmodern ethics. The experience gained through life through past experience gained have some implications. While we are trying to relate the effect of age on decision making, but truly also other side, the ethics definitely has an impact on how you are making a decision, and you just cannot come to the conclusion older people are more in a nature than the younger people. All the variables what you're trying to put forward over here is all the variables and interacting with each other constantly, interacting with each other to affect each other, and very difficult to separate out and tell like a elder people think more ethically than younger one, or the males are differently better than the females and vice versa. If not, we have control for the other influencing variables, and here for age of a gender, of course, various characteristics of thinking when you are talking about a gut feelings and experience, this may affect the individual variables of a age and gender. And also the other psychological variables related over here, the cultural context related over here, because it depends also on the culture that you have brought in, which helps in like a person getting introduced to socially acceptable gender roles of the ways of thinking, ways of believing, and that we have tremendous impact on whether people like different genders think differently or different ages think differently or not. So this is a very complex relationship with like only just separating of the variable and asking like whether they have an impact or not. Some findings are contradictory in nature due to the nature of other variables which we interacting with them. Next, educational and employment. Types and quality of education may be influential. For example, business students rank lower in moral development than others and more likely to cheat. Amoral business education reinforces myth of business as a amoral. When you are talking of education and influences, again there are training on something about how to think ethically in a certain way. Obviously, it helps you in ethical decision making, like we are learning this course, have to understand what are the correct ways of ethical decision making with respect to business situation. So, if any person who has registered for this, if any person who has not registered or not studied or gained first knowledge about what is a business ethics, how this ethical decision made in business situation, then the difference in the knowledge that two persons have like a how to decide in a proper way in what type of a situation may lead to certain differences in the way that they are looking at a particular problem, analyzing the problem and taking their like final decision steps about it. So type of education, the quality of education that are getting positive effect in influence in the ethical decision making process. Next, psychological factors. Cognitive moral development, that is CMD, refers to the different levels of a reasoning that an individual can apply to the ethical issues and problems. So criticism of CMD, gender bias, impact value of a judgments, invariance of a stages. Any individual locus of a control determines the extent to which they believe that they have control over the event in their life. So we come to discuss about the psychological factors and the features involved which helps in ethical decision making, influences your ethical decision making process, and discussing about cognitive moral development theory, which is based on Kohlberger's research, which talks of the different levels of reasoning that an individual has developed and which applies to the issues and based on their listening. So there are different stages of development is the lifespan age wise, development in the lifespan, life stages, they come to the conclusion about what is a right and what is a wrong according to the different life stages, and these are called cognitive moral development. We'll be discussing that is the next upcoming discussion, and it has got the three levels: pre-conventional, conventional and the post-conventional levels. So there have been some criticism regarding it, may majorly is regarding the gender's bias for this, because Kohlberg's research, majorly the research was done in the male decision makers and not on the female decision makers. That is why I like you are talking about the way of looking at things, looking of the relationship priorities, like women think differently and their self is inverted in a different way, in a web of relationship, and self identity concept lies in the relational perspective. So that is why this ethics is developed into the looking into the Kohlberg's things of how these stages progress. Now, looking into things where at the end you are more guided by the principles, and very important thing is that ethical decision making is individual locus of control. So, locus of control tells about where does the control lie for who is determining whether you are responsible for your action. So, if people may have either external locus of control or internal locus of a control. So, because the control of the action, what they are doing, it does not lie within them. So, the outcomes are consequences of those action also, they are not responsible for it. Those who have internal locus of a control means who feel like they are responsible for their own actions, then they are like also feel like they are accountable for their own, they are accountable for their actions. So this is a locus of a control which determines the extent to which life determines they take the responsibility also for the consequences of their actions, mainly in terms of the harms provided or harms done as a consequence of these activities. The references for this topic are, thank you.